On the morning of Sunday, August 22, 2021, a young Irish man named Ruairí McSorley was preparing to swim off Castle Gregory Beach in County Kerry, Ireland. The sea appeared relatively calm, and there was nothing to suggest that this day would turn into one of the strangest rescue operations ever witnessed in the area. Ruairí entered the water wearing only his swimming trunks. He had a clear goal. He wanted to swim out toward a rock known as Mucklemore Rock, located several kilometers from the shore. But the open sea is very different from swimming close to the coast. As Ruairí moved farther away from the shore, the distance between him and land grew larger and larger. As time passed, returning became increasingly difficult. Somewhere in the middle of the water, he realized that things were no longer going according to plan. The shore was no longer close, and he no longer knew how he could make it back. Meanwhile, his family and people on the beach began to worry. Then something happened that made everyone realize there was a serious problem. Ruairí's clothes were found on the beach, but Ruairí himself was nowhere to be found. There was no sign of him. Nobody knew where he had gone, and nobody knew how long he had been in the water. The Irish Coast Guard was contacted, and a massive search operation began. The Fennet RNLI rescue team was deployed, joined by the Rescue 115 helicopter. Hours passed. Rescue boats moved back and forth across the water. The helicopter searched from above, and the rescuers watched the surface of the sea, looking for a head, a hand, or anything that could reveal the young man's location. But the sea was enormous. There was no sign of him. At first, the search was suspended in the afternoon because there was no new information. But later, the police decided to restart the search at around 6 o'clock in the evening. And this was when the strangest part of the story began. The sun was getting closer to the horizon. The light was fading, and the rescuers knew that time was becoming the greatest enemy. If Ruairí was still alive in the water, he was likely suffering from extreme exhaustion and cold. Still, the search continued. Then, at around 8:30 p.m., something happened that nobody expected. Members of the rescue crew spotted a group of dolphins in the sea. At first, there was nothing unusual about seeing dolphins. They were known to live in those waters. But one of the rescuers noticed something else. There was something moving among the dolphins. The boat moved closer, and slowly, the scene became clear. The dolphins were not alone. There was a human head above the surface of the water. It was Ruairí. He was several kilometers from the shore, alone in the open sea, surrounded by a pod of dolphins. The rescue boat immediately rushed toward him. When the rescuers reached Ruairí, they found him alive and conscious. But he was in extremely poor condition. He was exhausted, cold, and suffering from severe exposure after spending many hours in the water. Reports indicated that he had been in the sea for around 12 hours. The rescuers pulled Ruairí onto the boat. They immediately began helping him and quickly transported him back toward the harbor. From there, he was taken to hospital. And somehow, the man who had disappeared into the sea for hours had survived. But one question remained in everyone's mind. Why were the dolphins around him? Were they trying to help him? Had they stayed beside him and somehow protected him? Or were they simply there by coincidence? The truth is that the rescuers could not prove that the dolphins were deliberately trying to save Ruairí. But they had found a large group of dolphins surrounding him. And perhaps they helped the rescuers notice him. Maybe they had been protecting him. Maybe they had simply happened to be there. Nobody knows for certain. But one thing is certain. After nearly 12 hours alone in the open sea, Ruairí McSorley was found alive, surrounded by dolphins.